Good afternoon. Thank you for attending and welcome to the meeting of the Finance Committee. The meeting today is open to the public. However, Appendix 1 of the report at item 10 on the agenda is not available to the public or press because it contains exempt information relating to financial and business affairs. If members wish to discuss the information in this document, we will need to ask the members of the public and press to kindly leave for that part of the meeting, and we will pause the webcast. The meeting will be webcast and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. It is also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting. We have received no public questions or petitions. Please can I request that mobile telephones and other such equipment are switched to silent mode as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instructions from the Town Hall staff. The assembly point is Tudor Square. For the benefit of the webcast, please can each Finance Committee member introduce themselves? And I'll start with Mary.
Councillor Mary Lead up from Darnell Ward.
Councillor Ibiula, Netheredge and Sharrow.
Councillor Toby Mallinson, Hillsborough.
Marianne Elliott, Green Councillor for Gleadless Valley.
Councillor Brian Lodge, Burley Ward.
Councillor Andrew Sanger, Councillor for Forward Ward, here as substitute for Councillor Glynis Chapman.
Councillor Mike Lever, member for West Ecclesfield and Vice Chair of Finance.
Thank you, and I'm Councillor Zahira Naz, member of the Darnell Ward and Chair of the Finance Committee. Item 1, is there any apologies for absence?
You've got, Chair, I've got apologies from Councillors Chapman and Mohammed.
Thank you. Item 2, exclusions of press and public and press. Appendix 1 of the report on item 10 on the agenda is not available to the public or press because it contains exempt information. So if members do want to ask any questions, we will have to switch off the webcast at that point. Item 3, is there any declarations of interest? No. Minutes of previous meeting. This can be found on page 11 of the agenda pack.
Chair, if I can, I was put onto the committee on the 1st of November, but I wasn't notified about a meeting on the 6th of November, so technically I was showing as absent, but I wasn't notified until the morning of the 6th, so I just wonder if that could be amended on the minutes. Apologies. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah,
that'll be right, Chair, because the summons will have gone out before Councillor Lodge was appointed, therefore he didn't get the summons, so I think it's probably not right to show him as absent.
That's absolutely fine, Councillor Lodge, and Rachel will make the amendments. Is there any other issue on that? No? Okay, so are we all happy to approve as a correct record? Yep, that's fine. Thank you very much. Item 5, public questions and petition. There isn't any today. Item 6, members' questions. We don't have any questions submitted by members. Item 7, the work programme. This can be found on page 13 of the agenda pack, and I'll pass it to Rachel Appleyard.
Thank you, Chair. So the work programme lists all the known substantive agenda items for the next meetings of the committee. There's been 3 changes since the last meeting, which are highlighted on page 16 of the agenda pack. So we've got a new item on the Solpro lease, which is coming to this meeting today, and then an additional item on changes to the Constitution. There's been a slight update since the agenda was published for this meeting as the timelines have changed. So the final decision maker for that will be the Council AGM. So this will come to the March Finance Committee. However, members will be getting a briefing on this in January. And then there's an amended item as well. The lease at Millhouses Park will be coming to the January meeting of this committee. A breakdown of items for forthcoming meetings can be found in part 3 of the report, which is on page 18. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Elliott.
Thanks. Just a quick question. On the work plan, page 21, there's reference to a levelling up prospectus. Just wondered what that is, please.
Yeah, this report, it was initially delegated from the Strategy and Resources Committee, I believe, but hasn't been given a timeline. I'm not aware of any further information on that though, but I can go away and speak to officers and find out for you.
Can I just ask something else about the levelling up? Because it would be good to, if someone could explain, and sorry if I've missed something here, what happened with the last round of funding, because my understanding was that there were 2 bids and seemingly they were both unsuccessful, but since then, one of them, the Parkwood Springs one, has actually been granted funding. And I just wondered, how has that come about? Does anyone know?
It's nothing, it'd be officers to take that on.
Yeah, I don't have the immediate background to that, but I'm sure we can find that out.
Okay, I mean, also I just wondered, because there were 2 bids and obviously one of them now looks like it has been successful, you know, if there's any chance that that might happen with the other one as well in Healy. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. We will get that additional information to Councillor Elliott. Is there anything else in regards to the work programme? No? Okay, so this does contain recommendations for approval. Are we all agreed? Yep. Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 8, the Q2 budget monitoring. This is on page 25 of the agenda pack, and Jane will be presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Wilby, Head of Accounting. The paper gives an update of the Q2 budget monitoring position for 23-24 for the General Fund, the HRA and the Capital Programme, the Collection Fund and the Treasury Management outturn. The committee's last update was in September on Q1. At Q2, the Council's forecasting an overspend in the General Fund of 17.4 million against a net revenue budget of 487 million, which is a variance of 3.6%. The Q1 position forecasting an overspend of 17.6 million, so not a big movement between quarters, but there was a large movement in Education, Children and Families Committee due to the recognition that the income forecast from health for integrated commissioning would not be achieved within the financial year. This was offset through our capital financing budget. Economic conditions continued to yield strong interest rates, and some of this is mentioned in the Treasury Management outturn appendices to the paper. We've had strong interest returns on our investment, and slippage in the capital programme has delayed our need for borrowing and strengthened the overall cash position, so interests have been above budget again this year. The 3 main areas of overspend for the Council are in adult social care, children's social care and homelessness. In adults, we've seen a huge investment bringing down the average costs following the spike we saw in the pandemic, but the service continues to be challenged by increasing demand and an inflating cost base. In children's, we've got huge challenges from the rising cost of placements, which is somewhat caused by limited supply in the city, alongside a shortage of foster carers to support the demand. We've also a rising cost of home-to-school transport. We're now supporting over 2,360 children, which has increased by almost 1,000 children in 4 years, including a further 89 from this school year. The homelessness situation has arisen post-lockdown. Coupled with the shortage of affordable housing in the city and a limited range of options, our use of hotel and bed and breakfast accommodation has reached an unsustainable and unaffordable level. The increase in homelessness is a national issue, and there are now more than 100,000 households in temporary accommodation, which is the highest level for 20 years. The housing revenue account was 1.9 million overspent. The biggest issues we face continue to be loss of rent from vacant properties and significant costs in the repairs and maintenance budgets from increases to equipment, materials and subcontractor costs. In spite of these emerging challenges, the £47 million worth of budget savings plans that were put in place as part of the budget last year currently are on 80% on track to deliver, with a further 12% that will be delivered in 23-24. The issues here in Sheffield are not unique, and councils across the country are experiencing the same challenges and financial context. We've seen 4 local authorities in the past 12 months declare insolvency, issuing 114 notices, Nottingham being the most recent name added to the list. In Sheffield City Council, we've been able to manage the overspends against budget by drawing from reserves for the past 2 financial years, and we will do so again this year if no further mitigations are brought forward. We set aside 70 million of our reserves in 21 for budget contingency, and we will have 13 remaining by the end of the year. But reserves can only be used once, and ours are depleting as our overspends continue. The autumn statement offered no reassurance from government that there will be any additional funding for local authorities. The medium-term financial analysis was presented in September, and it highlighted a £61 million gap over the next 4 years, with 18 million falling in 24-25. Services have been developing solutions and have brought all their options forward to recent policy committee meetings. They will make the final policy decisions in December. Consultation on the existing proposals on overall budget will need to take place. Further options will need to be developed. The local government financial settlement is due today, and the impact of that will need to be assessed and reported. On the 21st of December, Strategy and Resources will be asked to make a recommendation on savings to date to Council. The appendices are Capital Monitoring Report, which forecasts an outturn position at the end of September of 231.6 million against an approved budget of 292.6 million, which is a variance of 65 million. The report details the key programme risks, issues and overspends in the programme. This Appendix 2 is a Treasury Management outturn, which summarises the position for Q2 and the potential implications for revenue budgets. It sets out the indicators that are not already covered in the Treasury Management Strategy Statement, but are required to satisfy the Council's Prudential Code and Treasury Management Code of Practice obligations. The Collection Fund in Appendix 3 summarises the fund outturn position and the estimated balance that will be made during the year. In summary, the Council must continue to drive the delivery of budgets, savings plans and tackle in-year overspends to prevent the budget gap from widening. The committee is asked to note the Council's financial position as at Q2, 23-24. The Q3 position will be presented to committees in March. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Councillor Livery.
Thanks, Chair. The situation with children and families is causing me more and more concern. It's gone up by another 2 million overspent since Q1, and I'm presuming we're still seeing the same sort of level of increase happening again towards the end of Q3. So I've got 2 questions associated with this. Quite a lot of the 2022-23 BIPs were transferred across into 23-24. How many of those are still not delivered? And how many of the BIPs set for 23-24 have not been delivered or won't be delivered this year? Thank you.
So for the 23-24, we are currently 80% on track to deliver. I think the delivery rate in children's and families is lower than that. I think it does note the position in the paper. The 22-23, I think we achieved 65% delivery overall. Some of the delivery did fall into this year. Some of it was then built into the base budget position. So there are still a number of outstanding budget savings. One of those was recognised in this month, which was a 2 million adverse movement that we saw in children's and families. So there is a bit of a crossover position in some of those underlying budgets. In the Children and Families Committee, you're right, the budget does continue to be a really challenging one. The homeschool transport provision, I think, again, we've noted in the paper, we're increasing the number of children that we're providing transport to school for, and that's increased again as the new term started. There is an overarching review of transport services that's going on at the moment that's going to try and look at opportunities to provide savings and look at efficiencies within how we deliver that transport provision in services. There's also the cost of placements continue to be really, really expensive. A shortage of supply, a shortage of labour as well, means that we're sometimes having to pay a lot for even out of city packages to support children in the city. So it's really, really difficult. The services are working to look at ways to improve the budgets. Another one that we're sort of falling short on for education, children and families is in the foster care in provision. We've got a shortage nationally, and that is, again, another national issue that other authorities are facing. They can't get the number of foster carers in the city to come forward, really, and support children. The places that we've kind of budgeted for, we're not sort of achieving that level at all. So there's a number of challenges in that particular service, and it doesn't look to be any improvements in the outturn, you know, since we've reported the Q2 position. We've closed another month of accounts since then. It's not particularly improved since then, unfortunately.
Can I ask further then on the overall overspend, which was at 17 million, which hasn't moved much from Q1? Are we saying this is what it's going to look like at year end? 17 million out of the 30 available, and what are the chances of recovering some of that? Because with just 13 million left in the reserve, that won't carry us through the following year. Thank you.
Services provide the information to present the outturn position. So the finance team do work closely with the services to support the quality of forecasts that they've kind of put forward. Sometimes we do see people being a little bit pessimistic towards the beginning of the year, and that does unwind towards the end of the year. I think the challenges this year that we've got, particularly in children's social care and in homelessness, probably don't present the same opportunities that we had in previous years around the prudence that might unwind towards the back end of the year. We may see further upside in our treasury management outturn. I think Damien's probably going to talk a little bit about the capital programme again. We've seen slippage in the capital programme that's meant that we've been able to, you know, have some upside really in the fact that we're not borrowing. We've got a strong cash position. The interest rates are high, so that's kind of working out well for us at the moment. I mean, other than that, there's not really a huge amount of upside. It's a really, really challenging financial context at the moment. And again, if you read in the press, it's the same everywhere else.
Thank you, Councillor Senghor.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just to pursue those points in terms of education, children and families, because clearly some of this is a demand-led budget that we're used to the pressure in terms of things like the placement costs. But I think members need to understand what percentage of BIPs are being delivered on something like that, which has been a pressure for, you know, at least the last 15, 20 years. And then we've got issues like the fostering placements, where clearly it was a budget choice that we said it was achievable. And it's just concerning that it's at this stage, 6 months in, we talk about 1.6 million. But I really want to sort of focus in on the home to school transport. I mean, have we implemented all the previous reviews? And at what point did somebody spot that we've gone from, 1,400 children being taken to school to, 2,400? I mean, it does seem to be a very large increase over a relatively short period of time, and wasn't a major feature of either last year's budget discussion or the year before's budget discussion. This is not the first time we've looked at home to school transport. I'm just concerned that you talk about a review coming in 2024. It seems to me we've got a budget to deliver now.
As I understand, the review programme is already underway, so the kind of work is already happening to think about what the short-term things that we can do to sort of really, reduce that financial pressure that home to school transport is creating. So there's probably a range of options that I'm sure that the Education, Children and Families Committee will present, that the officers will present to committee to kind of what they can do in year to manage and mitigate that position. There's a lot of things that come. Some of it is demand-led, as you said. Some of it is, the price that we are forced to pay for the provision. But there are probably things that we can be doing. But as I understand it, the work is underway to sort of come up with action plan to reduce the overall financial impact of that, because it has become unaffordable.
Thanks, Chair. I think I'm really struggling with this home to school transport one, because I was cabinet member for 2 years, and I know we carried out a review, we know we implemented those things, and clearly one moves on, but we never had this sort of number, and I'm just concerned that somebody somewhere has taken their eye off the ball. I just want some confidence that previous reviews have been implemented, because there's a danger of reinventing the wheel here, I feel. Just in terms of homelessness, which is clearly a national challenge, what confidence can you give us that this is very much a one-year blip, that there's a problem at the moment, and that we've moved it to strategy and resource energies rather than housing. But it seems to me that what we're doing this year is bridging the gap. We're not necessarily finding more accommodation, and why are we not going to be in the same place this time in 12 months' time?
The homelessness situation has, as you rightly say, is a national issue, and we've seen councils across the country reporting how difficult they're finding this in terms of finding a solution to it. I don't think that it's going to go away in the short term. So next year, it's still going to hit budgets next year. We have provided for that in the baseline budgeting process for next year. So hopefully, if we've estimated the demand and the costs at the correct levels, we should have some level of coverage in the budgets for next year. However, not to say that we're not actively working as a council to try and mitigate the overall impact of it. There's a lot of work going on to sort of unlock vacant void properties and the current stock that we hold. There's work underway to kind of expedite the time it takes between the turnaround time for repairs of void properties that are sat in temporary accommodation. There's capital investment sort of feasibility underway about investing in temporary accommodation. There's a lot of work to kind of have a look at what the baseline position is, and that will be brought forward. Well, it's kind of a lot of work's happening across the council and lots of different teams at the moment. It's not going away, unfortunately, the issue. I think it's partly, we don't have the accommodation in our council housing stock to be able to manage the demand that we've got at the moment. So there's a range of options that we can look at as well, working with the private sector. We're also speaking to our core cities colleagues to see what they're doing elsewhere. So Manchester, for example, we've been speaking to colleagues in Manchester to understand how they're coming up with solutions to the problem, and sort of where we can learn from them, etc. So there is work underway to try and look for resolutions, but in terms of the overall demand, it's not going away within 12 months, certainly.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, just a comment on that. I mean, we basically have three big demand-led budget pressures, and we have done for the past 10 years. And one of those is adult social services. One of those is children, particularly the children's specialist places. And the third is homelessness. And the adult social services, by hard work of that committee and officers, seems to be under more control this year. I'm hoping that colleagues in homelessness team and colleagues in children and families can learn the lessons from adult social services, so that we can get these budgets into a better position next year, because this year's clearly been very challenging. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lodge.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, and thank you for the report and the presentation there. Just looking through, inflation is dropping. I understand that the costs have already increased and are embedded there in the cost, but now it's dropping. Is it 4.6% they projected? They're saying it's running out now. Will that have any impact at all, or are you just saying, it's good news, but that's next year's benefit? There's nothing this year at all.
I think, yeah, you're right. Unfortunately, a lot of the costs that they've inflated to a certain level, and that's where we are for this year. We may see some better costs in energy prices towards the back end of the year as prices drop there, because I think it depends on the cost base for the service. So, for example, in the waste and street scene service, their inflation indices is pitched on a January indices, so that kind of, it was already set for the beginning of this year, which was over 12%. So that's kind of baked into the budgets for this year. We've kind of estimated what that's going to be for next year, and you know, as kind of the inflation sees kind of level out and towards the back end of the year, we might see impact into next year. So there may be some upside in certain areas within services, but I think on the whole, no, we're operating at a much higher cost base as a result of inflation.
Thanks. There's a few other things just in looking through the report and picking up, I think, on things that colleagues there have said about the temporary accommodation. Just looking on the housing revenue account, lost rent and council taxes is about £3.3 million that's in there. There's another 4.7 that we're spending around disrepairs and the cost of disrepairs. Are we looking at anything as an investor say? Because if we're spending or losing, if you know, the spending 4-point-something million and the loss of rent and council tax we're paying, £8 million. Are we looking at anything creative to do something to bring some of these voids back on? Because it has the added benefit of reducing the bed and breakfast accommodation and temporary accommodation and moving people. The report talks about moving people from temporary accommodation into longer term accommodation, which frees up and moves it all the way down the line. So are we looking at anything in there as being creative to use it? Because it just seems to be just chucking money at the problem and not doing anything about it. And we've known this has been a problem, but there doesn't seem to be anything done. And forgive me if it's been reported, I can't see anything that says this year that we've done anything towards it so far.
For the disrepair claims, there was a team that was put in place. So, you know, the amount that we're seeing in the budgets this year are lower than previous years, still high, still far too high. You know, we don't want to see those costs, but I think there has been a team that's in place looking at how they can reduce the cost escalation. Because I think the amount of time that a claim is open kind of the cost escalates for the amount of time. So in terms of getting the cases looked at and closed down on a quicker time frame, that they're kind of working on that. So I think there's a team in place that's specifically looking at disrepairs, and they are reducing the amount and reducing the cost impact. In the voids team, there has been a multifunctional voids team that's been put in place, again, to try and address some of the issues that we've got in voids and some of that links between housing repairs and maintenance, but also, you know, actually getting the properties re-let as well. So there has been a couple of specialist teams, and in terms of the investor say, that voids team is actually funded through some of our transformation funding. So earlier in the paper we talk about a £4 million transformation fund that was kind of there to enable delivery of the budget savings and sort of, you know, contribute towards bottom line savings for the council. So that was one of the investments that we did make this year. And in terms of all those business cases, the progress of those business cases reported on a monthly basis to the Performance and Delivery Board, which is an officer-led board, you know, that's chaired by, I was going to say the Director of Finance and Commercial Services. It's not actually, but there is some governance in place to make sure that we're tracking against the investment of those programmes. So there are things in place, but I think sometimes it does take a while to filter through into the accounts.
And it may not be something you can answer here, but the voids and the issue of voids, is it a capacity issue within the repair service? In which case, should we be investing some of that money to get outside work in? I know you know, I'm not suggesting we outsource, but we've got a big problem here that we need to get these houses back online. We need to get people in the properties. People are crying out for properties. And if we've got a capacity issue, surely we should look at short-term doing something there. I'm not sure if that's something you can answer. That may be something I have to ask the Housing Committee Chair on there. So, thanks for that. You talked about the Transformation Fund of the £4 million that was put in there. And this was the big group, the BIG. Have they been successful in things in it? Because it talks about them in there, but I can't see if it's have there been some things that they have managed to do that have helped the services in delivering on the BIPs? It says it looks to facilitate council-wide learning, and its purpose is to improve the delivery of the annual budget. But you know, is there something measurable there that they've actually achieved? And the other side of things there is last year, it was one of the things when we were looking through at the budget in here last year, we were talking and saying it was almost looking at external eyes to look at things, because there's a danger when you work in constantly, we get too focused and looking at things, and sometimes an external view. I know we've had a change in officers, which has probably helped in different people coming to see things, but has there anything been done about that? Because we were talking and saying it was one of the things that we discussed in this committee last year around external consultants and maybe getting an overview and see if they could see different ways of doing things.
Can I just clarify, do you mean in a particular service in terms of getting that external assurance?
I know a lot of other councils make use of you know, large accountancy firms that come and look at these things. So the likes of Deloitte and PricewaterhouseCoopers and all things like that. Clearly, we've not looked at that. We're looking internally still. So it was just looking, because it was one of the things to say in this committee last year, we discussed it around an external view in maybe having fresh eyes looking at things rather than we keep focusing on the same sort of, we've used the term many times, and we're death by 1,000 cuts, and sometimes you've got to look at things differently. So I see the BIG is there to try and do that, but we're just doing it internally again. We're not using external support towards that.
So the business budget improvement group, the big group, the purpose of that, again, like it says in the paper, to initiate the council-wide learning. So it is an officer-led group. It's chaired by the Director of Finance and Commercial Services, who's just walked back in here, so he can probably answer some of these questions better. You can repeat that all again, Brian. So in terms of the work that the Transformation Fund is intended to deliver, so a lot of the business cases that came forward were about unlocking blockages to get those budget savings delivered, or where we've got particular sticky issues in certain services, so the voids, for example, or certain things in certain services to kind of brought forward to say, this is what we really need to transform our service. And there were a couple of pieces of consultancy work involved in those business cases as well. So we have got some work underway in our digital and innovation team at the moment to look about how we transform ourselves of the council. So we have got some external sort of assurance pieces going on at the moment to sort of support the work and the direction that we're going in with ICT, and also a bit of organisational design and thinking about and strategic support services and how we sort of operate more effectively and efficiently. So some of the business cases, the transformation business cases that have been brought forward are officer-led, and they have been sort of developed within services with the expertise and skill sets within the services. Some of them have been externally commissioned as well. So it's a bit of a blend of both. But yeah, take the point that sometimes you do need to have fresh eyes to kind of, come up with new ideas, etc. In terms of the achievements of the big group, I think bringing the right officers together on a regular basis to sort of really focus the attention on the budget savings has been a positive step in the right direction. We saw last year a 65% savings delivery rate. We've moved to 80% this year. So whether we've been more realistic in terms of what we've put forward in terms of those budget savings, and they have been more deliverable, etc., then again, that's an achievement, I think, in itself, to move, to a better delivery rate than we had last year. I think it's brought about better education in terms of the officers, and more, a keen focus on bringing forward the right savings and understanding the impact on individual budgets. And the process that we've gone through this year to introduce the transformation funding into that as well, again, has provided another opportunity to, to kickstart some of those sticky issues and some of the things that services need to deliver. So I think whilst there's not been one shining example to say this is what we've achieved overall, there's been a lot of really good work on the foundations in terms of, engagement in the budget from a lot of different services, and sort of work towards improving our financial position generally by, really getting to grips with what the particular knotty issues are in services.
I've just got a couple more, if that's okay, Chair. I'm conscious of a lot of questions. It's a comment really. Councillor Sanger said about whole school transport, and you were a cabinet member, and I remember every year. I can remember Councillor Drayton when she was on talking about this, and we were looking at doing more work around independent travel and supporting, and it seems to be a perennial problem that we don't seem to get a grip on. And and it'd be interesting to see if something does happen, because we seem to say every year we're doing a review on it, and it just wonder whether we actually implement a review or we just review with the review, because that seems to be what happens on things in there. Just the only other thing I'd say is just as a final comment, Chair, and it's a plea, really, because when it goes on 1.67 is saying the timetable to next year's budget setting. With my colleagues, we've not had any sight of the proposed savings that come through, and we did ask officers, and we asked around this, and we were told that we are not part of the administration, therefore the Sheffield Community Councillors Group would not be allowed access to the RAG rated savings, and we'd have to wait until it came to strategy and resources. It's a plea, really, if we can have a look, if we can be provided with these so we can have a look at it, because even when it goes to strategy and resources on the 21st, that report isn't public, so unless it's only Councillor Hurst who's on strategy and resources, so it would be helpful if we could see those, so at least we can have a look at it and see what we're talking about, because we haven't been provided with them at all. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to bring David in now, because I'm sure that should be available to all councillors, but I'll double check.
I think that, yes, that's the position, and we clarified that with councillors, say that all the available savings proposals should be available to all groups.
We've not seen them, Chair. We've not had anything.
Well, we can make the arrangements for that, but it was made clear a while ago that they were available to all groups. Not the actual individual ratings by other groups, but the information that is in there.
I appreciate that. We're not asking for the ratings of other groups, we're asking for the savings, because last year all the groups did it, where they looked and they booked thing, and everything that was green we banked and put it to one side and said let's focus on things that are going to be a little bit more difficult. We've not been given the list of all the proposed savings in there, so we're not in a position to look at them, and it would be helpful because, as I say, you know, we're starting to come and looking at things, and we'll be looking at the budget as well, so it'd be helpful to see all these things and see if the things that we agree with or things that we think are a little bit too far. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lodge. I think they will be made, the budget savings proposals will be made available to your group, and that's not a problem. Yep, that's fine. Thank you. Councillor Levery, did you want to come back?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Bear in mind that Strategy and Resources are going to get a proposal on the 21st, based on what the government decisions are in terms of funding for next year. Can the spokespeople for finance have a briefing on it, please, in advance of it going to SMR? Because I think this is important, in particular, looking at the scale of overspending, and potentially maybe use of reserves to balance budget for next year. If we're in that sort of scenario, we really need to get an understanding of where we are with this settlement and what the impact will be on the council. Thank you.
I think we'll know a bit more, because the government settlement will be coming out tomorrow, and hopefully tomorrow it'll come out, and we might get a bit more of an indication on what that looks like and how that will impact our budget moving forward.
I'd like to go into Christmas knowing where we are. That's all. Thank you.
Philip?
So we do have a finance briefing scheduled for tomorrow. If the settlement is published today, we should be able to give you an indication of what that looks like for this particular council. If it's published at some point after sort of this evening, we'll need to arrange a separate time, and we can find a time probably on Wednesday to do that for you.
Thank you, Philip. Councillor Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. Just two questions from me. So one on housing, which is at page 45, regarding the asylum cases, which is due to the government's acceleration of decisions to try and make it look like there's less people in the system. So there'll be a lot more people presenting as homeless, and obviously it's good to hear that work's being done. I just wondered what options are being considered, and are there any buildings that you're considering which could be used to house people?
I think there are a number of options that are available, and I think that officers are looking at private sector capacity, looking at leasing options, they're looking at repurposing particular accommodation that we either hold on stock that's not housing, or looking at our partners really to see if there are other accommodation that we can use for temporary accommodation. So there are a number of options. Some of them are within our own stock, within our own gift to try and sort of push those forward. Some of them are commissioned options. Some of the new build that we're trying to look at whether we can, in terms of the capital programme, whether we've got some options there. Obviously the timescale on new builds will take a lot longer. So there are a number of things that they're looking at the moment. But yeah, I'm sure we can get further information as that kind of work progresses with the working group, the officer working group that's sort of working on that. Again, that particular issue is being reported to the Performance and Delivery Board regularly. So there's going to be an update, I think, in January to the Housing Committee in terms of what the immediate sort of action plan is going to be to address the homelessness situation. So again, that will be sort of brought forward to the Finance Committee when we do the next financial update. But if we can, share any information in the meantime, then we will do.
Thank you. That'd be much appreciated. I think, repurposing seems like a good option, doesn't it, if there's anything available. So my second question was it was on the S&R, and it's at page 49. So, electric works, sorry, and I've asked about this several times. So last year when I asked about it, the rental conditions were being changed to make them wider, but it's still only at 57% occupancy. So just wondered if there's any sort of specific reasons why it's not fully let, if there's an update. And also I'm a bit concerned that at item 10, which I won't go into details on, we're considering a lease agreement, which is going to be at a cost, which is essentially leasing another building, but then we've got empty units like this one available. So I just wondered if there's any update on electric works, please.
As far as I understand, I've not seen any updates in terms of the tenancy schedule for electric works. The problem was we did lose key tenant in October, so the issues last year were fed into the budget. There was, in terms of the pressure that we had from the loss of previous tenants, we've then lost further tenants. They did some work around reconfiguring the space, making it more lettable, etc. I'm not sure whether we've had any further tenancy schedules agreed as a result of that. So again, it is being actively marketed. I can ask for an update from the property team to see if there's any updates on that really. But as I think we haven't seen the impact in the forecast, unfortunately. So I think the assumption is there isn't any additional tenants that we're taking on within this financial year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ibiula.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Jane. It's great to hear there's a voice team in place. Just want to know how effective have they been, and are we seeing the number of properties that are not let out, could be let out, decreasing? Are we seeing the fruits of that team, basically? Can you tell me more information about that, please?
Thank you, Councillor. I don't have the information to hand, unfortunately, but we can, I can speak with Janet and the Voids team and sort of get an update on the numbers for that, because I think, I agree, I think the rest of the committee would be interested in those numbers to see what impact that they are having, particularly given the investment that we've put into the team and the issue that we've got around the income in the HRA. So yeah, I'll get an update on that one for you. Councillor Lee?
Yeah, thank you for the report, and it does seem quite gloomy reading, really. But I was wondering, there's a number of reviews now being undertaken, one the transport from home to school in particular. Will we get updates regularly about those reviews, how they are progressing, what the plan is, what their plans are, and then how they are progressing in meeting those targets? So it would be useful to us, rather than get it at this stage, that get the information sooner, so we can ask questions and maybe add to the discussion that goes back to children's services, because sometimes there have been some unrealistic savings set that have not been achieved, and it seems to me sometimes there's been prior knowledge that maybe they would be difficult to achieve. So it would be good to get that information as well as it's the reviews are progressing and the plans are being set out.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I think that, again, the rest of the committee would be interested in having those updates. I can speak to Meredith and also I think there's an update due this side of Christmas from the wider strategic transport review. Some of the actions, the immediate actions might be, you know, in terms of not policy change, but actually sticking to the policy that we have got, which might mean, you know, that we do have to not provide as many homeschool transport for children as we do currently. We might have to be a little bit more strict in terms of enforcing that to make sure that we are operating within the financial envelope. It's very, again, it's a difficult position that we're in. Some of the recommendations that might come forward might not be ones that we particularly want to hear, but we do need to take some really, you know, critical action to make sure that we're operating within our financial envelope for homeschool transport. So the review that's taking place, there are updates that I think there should be an update this side of Christmas, but if not, it should be early January. And I'll speak to Meredith and the team to make sure that we can sort of share some of that information with the Finance Committee.
Councillor Mollison.
Thank you, and thank you for the updates and the detail that you're providing. It's just a quick question about something that was in the press last week. It's about the forcible academy transfer of Holgate and Heritage Park schools, and the concern that the council, because they've been forcibly academised, will be having to pay off multi-million-pound deficits, and whether that is, well, I believe it isn't in the budget at the moment because it's quite new stuff, but it is something I think the Finance Committee needs to be aware of, and a potential sort of another call on what might happen next year. So I'd appreciate a comment about that. Thank you.
So the schools that are currently, we have a number of schools that are currently in deficit position that are kind of outside of the council's general fund. Upon academisation, there's an agreement that the deficit will be brought into the council, you know, would be taken back to the council. So, you know, the academisation order is in place for one of those schools that was mentioned in the press, but not for the other, although that there might be on the horizons for that. There's been a number of actions to try and bring down the in-year deficit balances for those schools, and, you know, officers of the council and, you know, other consultants and, you know, people have been working with the school to try and help advise where they can sort of mitigate the cost base down, so that bring the overall in-year deficit down. So we don't know what that overall position looks like yet, and you know, when the academisation will actually take place, so it won't hit the general fund until that academisation process takes place. So we do closely monitor that with the in-house schools finance team, and those are reported to the schools balance at the schools forum. So there's lots of officer working groups that are kind of monitoring that and trying to actively manage that and work with the schools to reduce the impact on the council's general fund. And again, in terms of that, the amount of deficit that will be that the council will have to pick up, we're having conversations to try and minimise that where we can. Admittedly, I think, again, that's probably something that we need to bring forward into a finance briefing session to provide further information on the school's balances, because it's something that kind of sits outside the general fund, so you don't see in the outturn paper and you don't see in the paper that we provided. So happy to sort of arrange some of that in the briefing sessions in the new year.
Thank you. I think the schools are, I mean, they are the most challenging schools in the city. They cater for the most challenging young people in the city, often with very disadvantaged families. So there's lots of, they are high cost places, but arguably they're very good value for money as well, but they're just more expensive than your average special school. And they're suffering because of that, and it is a very difficult situation, but I think it's important that ultimately I think both will academise. I mean, one is definitely going to academise, and the other, the head teacher certainly appears to think he's going to academise, you know, so ultimately a big bill could well be coming to councils. But on the other hand, trying to save money within the schools when you've got such challenging children is a really, really potentially dangerous thing, because those children need high-level support, and if that's taken away through cost savings, then it's going to ultimately be more costly for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that would be really useful, Jane, if we have a briefing, maybe with Meredith, to look at that. But also, I think colleagues today have asked for further briefing on the Transformation Fund, how that's having an impact on the budget, and also updates on, I agree with Councillor Lee, updates on the reviews that are currently happening. And I know there's a review already happening looking at the homes to school provision, and this review will look at a range of issues, but it'll also provide an action plan at the end of it. But I think if we can have a briefing to also understand some of that and the impact that will have on the budget and how that can help reduce the pressure in children, I think that would be really useful for us as well. But it is going to be extremely difficult few years. 13 years of government cuts have made it incredibly difficult, and I think local authorities up and down the country are facing the same issues and problems that we are here. But thank you very much for the presentation today, and we'll move on to the next. Oh, sorry, we need to. I need to ask the committee: are we okay with the recommendations? Yeah. Is that okay? So that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item. And this is item number 9. You'll find this on the page 77 of the agenda pack, and it'll be Damien presenting this, and it's capital approvals for month 7.
Thank you very much. I'm Damien Watkinson. I'm the finance manager in the capital team, just bringing forward the changes and amendments to the capital programme that have come through the approvals process this month. I'll do my usual. I'll walk through high-level summary of the changes that have been brought forward, and then take any questions afterwards, if that's all right, or if you want to bring them up as we go along. Under Transport, Regen and Climate Change, we're passporting a £1.7 million grant through to development partner Situ regarding the Attercliffe waterside development. So this is going to help with an affordability gap on that scheme, which is going to regenerate the Attercliffe waterside area. This is phase 1 of that scheme, which will deliver a large number of new houses. Again, that will be passported through, and in Appendix 2, I believe it is, we publish the details of that grant and to be passported, so that's here for approval as well. There are 3 new pedestrian crossings that are being developed at Wordsworth Avenue, Creswick Lane and Glossop Road, all linking to the local neighbourhood complementary transport programme, the ongoing development to improve pedestrian situations for active travel. So these are improved pedestrian crossings. At this meeting, you'll see before the on-street chargers that are going to be delivered for electric vehicles. There's been a saving on that project, so we're just recording that. That's 61k of our local neighbourhood complementary transport programme funding that won't need to be used for that now, so we're just reducing that budget in line with the tender returns we've had. Under Community Parks and Leisure, we're undertaking some feasibility work at Longley Playground now in order to develop a plan there with funding that's been identified. So there'll be a consultation on that, and then we'll bring you forward later the outline business case, which will spell out exactly what's going to be achieved at that site. In previous meetings, we had 2 large grants for youth club improvements at Stocksbridge and All Saints. Part of that same fund that's come from Central Government Youth Investment Fund has given us some smaller grants to refurbish the Milan Centre, Oscarthorpe Pavilion, Tinsley Pavilion and Woodthorpe Youth Clubs. So 322k in total to improve facilities at those sites. Give me a second. At High Hazels Park, we've undertaken feasibility work. There was a shelter at High Hazels Park that's been reviewed, and they've had a look at how they want to improve that site, and now they're looking at demolishing that large shelter, creating a smaller one, a gym area, and making out a scoot track in the main play area. And that's funded from a number of sources. We've got public health funding, some revenue contributions and some local SIL contributions. So under housing, actually there's a couple of things here that potentially relate back to what's been discussed earlier. So it's more a movement of funds from revenue to capital rather than additional funding as such, but it does show the volume of work that's been undertaken on capitalised repairs, so large-scale repairs. So when RMS, repairs and maintenance service, go out to a property and perhaps it needs an entire new roof, that would actually be capital expenditure. They're getting a lot more of that sort of work coming through. So we're putting in place 2.2 million in the capital programme for those types of repairs that are actually enhancing those assets and improving them. And also there's 1.6 million for capitalised repairs to void properties specifically. So there's been an awful lot of pressure on the revenue budget, but we've identified that actually some of that work that was occurring was more appropriately capital funds. It's the overall pressure on the HRA remains the same because it's the contribution from the tenants that makes up the capital pot for those improvements, but I think it just does show that there is a large amount of expenditure going on in that area. So those two items are on there. On the next part, Errington Estate improvements, I just want to make a note on this for the minutes. It's to deliver some improvements that to prevent antisocial behaviour around that estate, particularly around the bin stores, etc. It just notes that the Housing Policy Committee Chair was briefed on it. He received an email, but actually the approval for this work came from the local area committee itself, and that's where the funding's coming from. So just for the minutes to note that it was a local area committee decision to deliver these improvements. We've also, last month we brought forward the Manor House Old Person Independent Living Fire Risk Assessment Scheme. That's been out to tender. Costs have come back above the original estimate, just because of increased asbestos findings and access that's required into ceiling voids. So we're adding in 143k in total to that scheme, which will be now a total of £628,000. There are a number of then reductions to various block allocations within the housing programme that fund the schemes that I've just discussed. And I think that then brings on to education, children and families. The Sheath Training Centre is investing 640k, some of its own revenue budget that it's contributed in prior years, plus some special educational needs capital funding that we've got. It's improving accessibility to the site, so disabled WCs, improved access to external areas and the construction workshop, so more of the attendees can access more areas of that site. It's hopeful that we'll also be able to perhaps increase admission as well on that and access, so more people can access that site. We are putting in place as well a 100k provision from the special needs capital funding for small scale adaptations that need to take place quickly. So often we may get a ramp might need installing at short notice if a pupil gets moved to a certain school, and rather than have to come back for each individual capital scheme, we're just making a small provision available here of 100k to be drawn down on, so that we can make those decisions. Those decisions can be made by committee by the officers more quickly to deliver those smaller adaptations. They're all the approvals. As I mentioned, there's the detail on the back-to-back agreement with Situ regarding the development at Attercliffe Waterside in Appendix 2. And we've also brought forward, and again this ties back to our Jane mentioned slippage in the capital programme, Appendix 3. I've brought forward the changes that are proposed to numerous budgets around large ones being like the Levelling Up Fund at the Castle site, Future High Streets Fund, and some of the clean air zone grants for buses and coaches. So they're summarised in this table, and it's approximately £23 million spent under the TRC committee that's slipping from the current financial year into next financial year. And like I said, those are summarised there with a short explanation of the reason for that. And also the other large element I've separated out is the housing. So we've got a couple of schemes. The external wall insulation packages have slipped on, and the rest of that is largely the stock increase programme. So, and most of that being the block allocation that's in there for stock increase programme, but also there's some acquisitions that have fallen behind. So the Corker Bottoms acquisitions from Sheffield Housing Company, and the acquisition we were making at Handsworth, where the developer had gone into receivership. So the whoever takes that over will continue to develop those houses and will still purchase, but that funding will now be spent in future years. So there's approximately 34 million slipping in the housing capital programme into next year. And again, just want to bring these forward so that we're now monitoring against a more accurate budget for the remainder of that financial year. And yeah, that's the highlights.
Thank you very much for that, Damien. Councillor Lee?
Yeah, thanks, Damien. You've cheered us up, I think, today. First of all, at Attercliffe Waterside, I think that's really good news, particularly for the city, but also for obviously for Darnall and my area. It's all part of the Attercliffe area master plan sort of development from the Olympic Legacy Park, which has transformed that area and is obviously bringing lots more investment into that part of the city because of what's happened with the development down at the OLP. So it's really pleasing that this is going to happen, and hopefully in future years we'd like to see the canal side improve from there, from Darnall to onto into the centre of town, and obviously further on down to Tinsley, where we have got a big art project that's about to be delivered down there. We talked about it the last time. Just in terms of the parks development, a few years ago policy went through to use public health money to improve our parks, particularly where health was poorest, and this was prior to COVID. And given COVID, and we know the benefits and the health benefits of parks, I'm glad to see that investment is still happening, particularly in Darnall. We've had benefited from that fund in the past, and obviously in High Hazels we will now. Again, Youth Investment Fund, that's brilliant news for Tinsley and for Woodthorpe, which is not far away from my area. And also just want to say that the Errington estate improvements, it was the response of the two councillors there, Ben Miskell and Nabila Nalama, who responded to local people and called public meetings, worked really hard to get to grips with what was happening there, and the investment has come from that, from their still money as well. So good news for that area particularly. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Okay, there isn't any further questions or comments. Damien, thank you very much. I also echo what my colleague Councillor Lee has spoken about in all the different investments, particularly across the city, but in our ward of Darnall and Tinsley as well. So that's really good news for us. This report does contain recommendations for approval. Are we all agreed? Yes, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Damien. Moving on to item number 10. This is the proposed lease at Solpro Business Park, page 107 of the agenda pack. Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, I'm Peter Bartle, Service Manager in the Estate Management team, and just introduced to you the Solpro lease renewal project. Housing services are currently based in Solpro, a building at the Solpro site. Their lease ended at the end of September this year, and we're currently holding over on that lease. The proposal is to extend that lease for a further 3-year term, having negotiated flexible terms so that we can take into account our accommodation review project with an expectation that we will vacate the premises within that 3-year period. The rent for that property is £331,000 per annum, which includes the majority of the service charges, although we will be responsible for the utilities for that period. There is an opportunity to break that lease early if we find suitable accommodation in the meantime for housing services. They're the highlights of the proposal. So if anyone's got any questions or any points they need me to clarify, I'm happy to take those points.
Thank you. Councillor Lodge.
Yeah, thanks. I seem to remember we discussed this some time ago, looking at this as coming out of Solpro. Wouldn't the plan to come out when that lease expired? Wouldn't the part of the proposals that were put forward then? And is it just a delay in this accommodation strategy that's forced us to take this out again? And the other question is, do we have an idea of how long they are likely to be in there for? Because I don't think we'd want to be here in 3 years again saying extend it again.
Yes, thank you. It's basically exactly as you explained. It's the accommodation review hasn't yet moved on enough and identified a space for housing to move into alternative accommodation. So the requirement's been to extend the lease on that basis. Provision has been made within the negotiated lease to ensure that we can exit as prudently as possible and as quickly as possible. That's the reason for a break clause from 18 months, as long as we give 9 months notice in advance. And also we've made provision for no increase in the rent over that period either, so that's a fixed rent for the whole 3-year term.
So we're looking at a minimum of 18 months in there then, if it's an 18-month break clause?
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
Okay, there isn't any further questions or comments. Okay, so this report also contains recommendations for approval. Are we all agreed? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much. And that's all for the meeting today. Thank you very much for your attendance, and I will see you next year. So everybody enjoy your Christmas and Happy New Year, and hopefully see you again in the new year. Thank you.